of the major failings of the modern education system is that it teaches people how to make a living, but it doesn't teach people how to design a life. And what you see in a lot of people in, the modern world is, first of all, there's, no preparation whatsoever for how the world really works. Nobody knows how to do taxes. Nobody knows, what the benefits of opening a business are or owning real estate. Nobody knows how to do it. It's not even taught, a lot of times in college. There's no teaching that you can go through. There's no courses. There's nothing, even to just learn basic stuff like how to buy real estate and rent it out to people, or how to, set up your LLCs, or how to do a will or a trust or any of these things. And, if you live in a world where you have to spend money and you have to invest money in order to set yourself up for long-term success, it seems pretty weird, and it seems pretty far off the mark. There's a word, sin, and sin means to miss the mark. So it almost seems like the sin of the modern education system is that it prepares you for a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with the real world, while it completely ignores this idea of like, how do you design a life? How do you do something that allows you to live in a way that's optimal for yourself and your family? And there's a lot of kind of like conspiracy theories out there that it's intentional. They want to keep the majority of the population dumb, working in meaningless jobs, so that they're too preoccupied to get in the way of important people doing important things. And while that might be true to a certain extent, I think the truth is probably less interesting, and that's why it gets ignored. The truth is probably that it's just not that great of a system, and that the system itself hasn't been updated. It's kind of like if you were using a computer nowadays and you're running it on Windows 98, despite the fact that it's 2023. Our modern education system isn't modern at all. It's the same as it was, 100 years ago. The same ideology is driving it, that you should go to school, go to college, get a good job, get married, get a mortgage, do all these things. But, nobody really talks about how is it that you can build a life that you actually enjoy. And, if almost half of people are getting divorced, if almost, half of people are having midlife crises, if there's this like huge wave of people that by the middle of their lives, they realize somewhere along the way, they've messed up, it seems pretty obvious. And it seems not only that it's pretty obvious, but it has been for a long time, that something is broken. And the problem is, we teach in schools a lot of things that I think are useful. It's good to know how to do math. You should know how to read and write effectively. You should know, biology. You should understand how things work and why our systems work the way they do, and why the world works the way it does. But more importantly, people should be taught, like, how does the financial world that we live in work? What is, the psychology of people? How does that affect the marketplace? How does that affect politics? How does that affect everything? And these are all things that you could teach to little kids. I have a 10-year-old, and I can teach him a lot of these things pretty simply. I show him all the time, like, if you want to make money, the best thing you can do is to make money and then invest it, and then use the money you make from your investments to buy the stuff that you want to buy. Don't use the stuff that you get paid for your time. Use the stuff that you get paid for investing. And it's really as simple as like literally just having one extra step in the process. A 10-year-old could understand that. So if a 10-year-old can understand that, why is it that it's not being taught? And the truth of the matter is, the people that are educating your children aren't any better off than you are. Most of the doctors out there, interestingly enough, there's a ton of doctors out there. Most of them aren't any better off than you are. And a lot of people think, if you're a doctor, you make a lot of money. Yeah, but you also have to pay for 8 years of very expensive schooling. By the time you're actually like making a lot of money, you're already 40, 45, 50 years old, maybe even older if you're not smart about paying off your student loans. And if you declare bankruptcy, most people already know this, but if you declare bankruptcy, those student loans don't go away. So no matter what, the rest of your life, these colleges are able to track you down and say, hey, you still owe us money and you have to pay us. And it's the biggest scam in the world because no other company in the world can underdeliver at such a high rate and still not offer a refund policy on what it is that they're supposed to be delivering. In fact, more than 60% of people don't even go into the field that they studied for in college. So if 2/3 of people, well, almost 2/3 of people, aren't even going into the field that they studied, there's obviously a major disconnect. And the problem is these major institutions, these large, corporations essentially have been around for a long time. Many of the people inside of those colleges have influence in government. And there's a significant amount of people in government who, they don't want to be giving people a free ride because you should have to invest in yourself in order to have a future. The problem is, though, that these colleges are not meeting the needs of people in the modern world. People aren't being taught, as an example, why is it that people are still opening brick and mortar businesses when you can do almost all of this stuff online? So people still have this caveman mentality, that they need to have an in-person presence, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I just went skydiving yesterday. They have to have an in-person presence. You have to go there to do it. But they do all of their sales online. People don't walk up there and buy it, buy their jumps. They buy it online. And a lot of people are stuck in this idea that, in order to build a business, they have to do things a certain way. In order to, invest, they have to do things a certain way. And there's a lot of people that kind of have made their living off of reinforcing this completely inaccurate idea about making money, about living a good life, about designing a life. And the thing is, it's not just about money. Money is easy. It's easy to talk about because you can count money. It's 1, 2, 3, 10, 50, whatever. But the thing is, if you're not taught on how to design a life, what happens is you just try to find a way to make money so that you can just pay the bills. And whatever, I've heard this said before. I think it was Tony Robbins said it, but whatever your standard is, you'll always find a way to meet that. So if your standard in life is if I could just get these damn bills paid, what you're going to do is you're going to always find a way to just get these damn bills paid. If your standard is, to have an extra $10,000 a month you're investing every month, you're going to meet that standard. And so if your only standard that you're taught in school is to get a good education and get a good job and pay your bills, all you're ever going to do is think that that's what you're supposed to do. And when your life isn't fulfilling because you're just, a hamster on a wheel, you're just a rat in a maze, you're just running in circles your whole life. When your life isn't fulfilling because no matter how many beers you drink on the weekend, no matter how many football games you watch, no matter how many different forms of mind-numbing entertainment you get involved in, you never seem to feel like your life has any purpose. It's no surprise that divorces are at 50%. It's no surprise that midlife crises are so normal that it's not even talked about. It's no surprise that people actually in the US become less happy the older they get. It's no surprise that people aren't even getting married anymore. It's no surprise that people aren't even having kids anymore, because people have missed a big chunk of what it means to be alive. And the craziest part about all of this is that it's actually really simple. Designing a life is really, really simple. And they can teach this stuff to kids. I've got a little book in front of me. I use this book every day. Every day I write out what I'm going to do tomorrow. So like I've got my plan for the day. I know I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And everything that I'm planning for tomorrow, if I was doing this today as an example, everything I'm planning is based off of whatever my goal is for the week. And my goal for the week is planned off of my goal for the month. My goal for the month is planned off my goal for the year. My goal for the year is always planned off of where I'm trying to be over the course of, basically the entirety of my life. And you can basically break this down. I have a course called the Infinite Breakthrough Program that I actually do this really in depth, but you could break this down into the 4 F's. Technically, you could say it's 5. So you have your fitness, which is your physical health and how you feel. You have your finances. You have your family and friends. You could say family and friends is 2 if you want. And then you have your fulfillment or your happiness or your joy. I think joy is a better word for this. And it's really simple, fitness being like, how do you want to feel? How would you like to look? On a regular basis, what do you want your energy levels to be? Your finances is pretty simple. How much money do you want to have every month, first of all, to be able to do whatever you want to do, like doing fun stuff, going out to the movies, going on dates, taking your kids places? How much money do you want to have to set aside for retirement? The crazy thing is most people significantly overestimate how much they need for retirement and how hard it is to save for retirement. And as a result of that, there was some numbers released recently by, I think it was CNBC or Forbes, that millennials only have about $30,000 to $50,000 saved for retirement. That's not enough. That isn't enough even for 1 year of retirement, given the cost of medical insurance when you are in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. But it's also, not the case that people need like $10 million. In fact, as a single person, if you have between $2 and $3 million at the time of your retirement, most people, provided you've already paid off your primary household, your main home where you're actually living, if you've already paid off your home by the time you retire, most people, $2 to $3 million is enough to sustain them at about $6,000 or $7,000 a month for the remainder of their life. Meaning you have $6,000 or $7,000 a month every single month to pay your bills and to do other stuff. Now, look, the average mortgage payment is like $2,000 and you're not paying that, you're only paying your property insurance, your property taxes and home insurance and other stuff like other insurances and other bills. Your monthly expenses should only be, $1,500 to $2,000. You should have, $2,000 or $3,000 a month that you can spend on your grandkids, on your kids, on going out with friends, on traveling, and the cool thing about this is when it comes to your finances, all of this stuff, there's tools out there you can use. There's websites you can go to where it'll ask you questions and it'll tell you how much money you need to be investing on a monthly basis and at what return in order to achieve that goal. And then you just reverse engineer. You say, okay, I want to be able to do this, so I'm going to need to be saving X dollars per month. I'm going to need to put it into something like an indexed universal life policy where it's tied to the S&P 500 or I'm going to have to do it this way or whatever way you figure out that you're going to do it. Some people like more risk, so maybe they'll buy, real estate. Some people like less risk, so they just invest into the S&P. But the point here is, if you're not taught how to design a life, what happens is you're going through life only thinking 1 month or 1 year at most ahead. And unfortunately, if you're trying to build up a retirement account, as an example, it's going to take time. It's going to take consistency to be able to put money into it and to have that money earn interest, to have that money earning interest, then compounding on a yearly basis. And so the same thing happens with your fitness when it comes to your fitness. When you're like 70 years old, do you want to be a fat old bastard and you just feel like crap? Or do you want to be in good physical shape, that you feel like, maybe you're 70 years old, but you actually only feel like you're like 40 years old because you've taken care of yourself? Do you want to look good? Do you want to have energy? I mean, if you're going to be 70 years old, you might have grandkids. Like, do you want to be the grandpa that, like, the kids are always like, oh, grandpa's like tired and old? Or do you want to be the grandpa or the grandma that your grandkids are like excited to see you because they know you're going to go do something fun? And it doesn't mean you have to be running around, right? You could be like 70 years old and out in the garden with your kids for hours on end, and you have the energy to do it. Or you have the energy to go out with your friends. If you're going to spend 30 years, as an example, in retirement, wouldn't it be good if during those 30 years you could take up a bunch of new things? You could get into gardening, you can get into, wine tasting, or, become an expert on making cheese or pickling foods or something else. I mean, there's all kinds of cool things that throughout your life you could still learn those things, but in retirement you have all of your time to pick up whatever you want to pick up, and it doesn't matter if it's financially successful. There's no stress about making money. And when it comes to your family and friends, it's a perfect example. Like, don't you want to be able to have the time for those people? And when you're designing a life, instead of just trying to make a living, you're looking at this like, I have 24 hours in a day. I need to sleep 8 of those hours. Out of the 16 hours I have left, I'm going to have to work for at least 8 of those, which means I have 8 hours for food, hygiene, spending time with family, spending time with friends. How can I make these relationships meaningful? One of the reasons I think that divorce rates are so high is because there's really 2 things that I think a lot of couples fail to do, maybe 3. The first is, most couples don't start off by building a vision together. One of the things me and my fiance are doing on a daily basis is we're updating our vision together. We're looking forward and we're saying, we want to be able to live this way. And, what's the right place for us to be living in? Like, what's the right area? What kind of house do we want to have? What's important to us? How can we take 2 different people? My fiance and I are very, very different. I would be totally happy living in the mountains in a town. We lived in a town at one point with only 400 people in it. I was so happy. Nobody bothered me. I could work my ass off for like 12 to 14 hours a day online because I run my own business. When you run a business, you work a lot. So it's very easy for me to be happy in that environment because I can do what's most interesting to me. And then when I'm not doing that, I have nothing but trees and wild horses and deer and all kinds of cool stuff around me that, for me, I'm very fulfilled in that kind of environment. My fiance is like a city person. She likes being able to order Uber Eats. She likes being able to like go out and walk around and see, what there is around the town. She's really into that. And because we're different in that way, we have to figure out, how do we make a vision together that we're both getting what's important to us, that we both get what's fulfilling, while at the same time not completely giving up our own personal happiness. And what you'll find is, if you're not in a relationship, you'll find there's things in a relationship when you end up in one that you have to figure those things out, and you have to update that vision every day. The second thing about why a lot of these people are getting divorced is because there's nobody actually trying. Yesterday, we went skydiving. We went out for Turkish food afterwards. We came home, and basically I planned out my day, she planned out her day, and we watched an episode of the Daredevil series on Disney. And like, that whole day, I planned that out a month ago. It took me a month of planning and thinking through, like, how do I give her like a really great Valentine's Day? Like, what's the like most over the top like kind of Valentine's Day where like I know for a fact she'll never forget it? And I was like, well, you never forget the first time you went skydiving. So like, that's a given. We're just going to do it. And also, I know that she's focused on her personal growth. And this is the third thing that I was going to get to, is both people need to be focused on their own personal growth. I know she's focused on her own personal growth. And a part of growing as a person is facing your fears. A part of growing as a person is doing new things. A part of growing is not being scared to go out and do things that are maybe a little bit unusual. You know, in the United States, I looked up the statistics this morning. A 0.1% of people will go skydiving in a given year. And that doesn't really for sure show that it's like a 0.1%, like new people. That's just a tenth of a 0.1% of the population. So less than 1% of people in the United States go skydiving over the course of any given year. So like being willing to go do things that are scary, that are unique, that are interesting, and building experiences. One of the I think the key lessons on family and friends that is missing both from, you know, people who are parenting and also from the school system is, you know, finding unique experiences and taking the time to plan out the details. I knew ahead of time, prior to us doing this yesterday, I thought through, okay, we're going to have to get up. I'll make us breakfast so she doesn't have to worry about making breakfast, and we'll have breakfast and we'll drive out there. It's a 2.5-hour drive to the place. We drove over there. On the way, you know, we were going to be talking about business. We've got a new thing that we're launching, so we were talking about how to build that out. And then when we got there, we would go through the little orientation. We'd do our jump. After we did our jump, we're going to go out to dinner. Fortunately, it actually took less time than we thought it was going to take. So we were able to go out to dinner pretty early because we eat really early. And from there, I was like, okay, cool. Like if we have the extra time, we can either go out to a movie or we can watch a movie or something at home. And that'll be like the end of the day. We can kind of chill out and relax before we get prepared for the upcoming week. And so this whole thing was planned out. And the interesting thing is the next big date on the calendar is her birthday in May. And so I'm thinking already now, I'm like, okay, well, we just handled Valentine's Day. So what's a good way that we could do something for her birthday? And I already am thinking ahead on that. When it comes to my friends, I'm doing the same thing. I've got a friend getting married in June. In June, I've got to go to Connecticut for their wedding. And then I have friends in Boston. I was like, okay, I've got to start planning stuff for June when I'm going to Boston to see friends. And just thinking ahead, even a couple of months, what it does is it gives you enough time and space to start looking and coming up with ideas. And look, if you don't consider yourself a creative person, because everybody's creative, it's just some of us have had it hammered out of us. And so we walk around saying this stupid thing like, oh, I'm not a creative person. Everybody's creative. It's just most people don't know how to like exercise that muscle because somebody told them they weren't good at something creative early on in life. But if you consider yourself a not that creative person, you can just Google stuff. What are the top 10 things to do in Boston with friends? What are the top 100 must-do things in X, Y, and Z? And so this idea is, you know, I'm not just having a life. I'm not just trying to make a living. And you know, my fulfillment is the same thing. I'm thinking through, like, what are some things I'm scared of? What is one thing every year that I'm scared of or that it's hard or seems challenging that I'd be willing to face? What's one fear I could face every year? And, you know, if you do this every year for your whole life, imagine you have 40 years from 25 to 65. The average person dies around 75 years old. So let's call it 50. Let's say from 25 to 75. And the reason I use the age 25, by the way, that's when like the human brain is completely developed. You're not even a completely developed adult until you're 25 years old. And you can tell. I mean, there's a dramatic difference between an 18-year-old and like a 26-year-old. But if for just 25 years old to 75 years old, you just face one fear a year, by the time you pass away, you'll probably be completely fearless, right? Who has more than 50 fears? That's a lot of fears. So you just face one fear per year, and then you have, 3 or 4 or 5 big things that you do with friends and family, if you did 3 a year for 50 years, it's 150, you could say, life-changing experiences that you do. It could be, climbing Mount Everest. It could be hiking the Pacific Coast Trail. It could be going to a country where none of you speak the language. It could be any number of things. And if you just do that a couple of times a year, you're building like a real life. You're doing something that you can leave behind for your kids. You can leave behind for your grandkids. And if you're actually taking the time, like we got video of our skydiving and everything else, and I've posted it on my YouTube channel. If you're taking the time to record this stuff and record the conversations you're having and talking to each other on camera, and you can leave all this stuff behind that, when your grandkids are little, they can look back and they can watch these videos and see, wow, like my grandpa and my grandma did this, and they went on these trips and they did these adventures, and they like saw the world, and they weren't scared, and they were interesting. And the thing is, if you want people to respect you, first of all, you have to respect yourself, and you start respecting yourself by taking your life seriously, by taking the time to actually plan things out and to think through things. One of the reasons why I push people so hard on starting businesses is because I think there are so many people out there that they're like, I wish I would start this business, or I wish I had taken action on this idea, or I wish I had done this. All of that stuff is just like, it's very heavy, and it's a heavy burden to carry with you through life, to feel like I failed because I didn't even try. The only people who really fail are the people who don't try. If you try and it doesn't work out, it's just an experiment. It's just like a thing. You're like, okay, well, this didn't work out. We'll try it another way. And if you just go through life like with a plan, and you're constantly like adapting that plan to everything that happens along the way, you're first of all, you might have more failures than anybody else but you'll also have more successes, because most people are trying to walk through life hoping that they end up at death's door safely. And the weird thing about this is you're going to die. You are literally going to die. I mean, that the scariest thing all of us can really imagine, like dying, is for sure. It is a certainty in life that we're all headed for death. And the sooner you face that, the easier it is to be able to go through this process of lifestyle design, because you're looking from death backwards and saying, how can I make this worth living? How can I make this life meaningful? What can I do that, instead of becoming a useless cog in a machine, just a piece of equipment to be used by the industrial machinery that is the modern world, instead of doing that, what can I do to build a life that's really meaningful? And maybe you don't want to start a business. Maybe that sounds terrible to you. There's a lot of people that maybe they shouldn't start businesses, but you could still buy real estate. You could still get into cryptocurrency. You could still invest into the stock market. There are multiple ways that you can set things up. There's a guy out there, he makes a full-time living just by buying stuff at garage sales and selling it on eBay. There's so many different things that you can do in the world nowadays that are more fulfilling for many people than just trying to find a way to just pay the bills. And if you don't design a life for yourself, you have to settle for whatever it is the rest of the world is willing to give you. And if you look at, the way the world works, is the people who settle get the least. The people who design get the most. You have to design if you want to have a good life. The difference between somebody who lives in an 8-bedroom, multi-million-dollar home and somebody who lives in a 3-bedroom, $250,000 home in the United States, the biggest difference between those two people is the person who lives in the multi-million-dollar home thought about what kind of home they wanted to live in and figured out how to get it. The person who lives in a $250,000 home, they didn't really think through things as much. They just wanted to get something. They are settling for the most part for whatever they can get. And the people who make the most money, the people who live the best lives, the people who you might be looking up to on social media and you might be saying like, wow, I wish I could be like that. The biggest difference between all of those people and the people who are less successful in the world, the biggest difference is just that they'd actually learn on their own how to build a life. They go out of their way to figure out, how do I design a badass life that every single day I can live in a way that I'm thoroughly enjoying my life. And the people who don't really get that are kind of just focused on like, how do I just get through life as safely as possible? And if the most scary, most dangerous thing, being dying, is a certainty in life, there's nothing to really worry about. Most of your failures, by the way, nobody's going to see. The people whose opinion actually matters, people who you like to think about you, like maybe you have a couple of friends that are really successful already, or maybe you at least know some people that are really successful, or you've heard of some people that are really successful. And you'd really like for them to tell you one day, like, man, I'm pretty amazed by what you've done. Or it'd feel really good if they said that to you, right? Those people don't give a damn how many times you fail. In fact, they don't even think about that stuff. And the reason they don't is because they've already gone through that. All of those people, they had to try stuff. They tried it and it didn't work. They tried something else, it didn't work. They tried something else, it didn't work. For every one success they've had, they had 1,000 failures. Look at Michael Jordan. He said the same thing. He's got a quote about missing like 10,000 shots over the course of his career. He couldn't have been considered one of the greatest basketball players of all time if it hadn't been for him being willing to take shots that he didn't know if he was going to make it or not. He had to take the shot. He had to figure it out. Now, he wasn't just shooting recklessly, though. Here's the second most important part of this, that people just like, oh, I'm just going to try whatever and hopefully something works out. He wasn't buying lottery tickets. He showed up to practice before everybody else. Same thing with Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant would show up to practice before everyone else, and he would stay when everyone went home. Like, you're not going to randomly become successful. This is like why day trading gets such a bad name, gets such a bad rap, because people think, oh, well, all I have to do is just buy something and then sell it for more money, and I'm going to get rich. You've got to be an idiot. You've got to be an idiot. This is not buying a lottery ticket with a high chance of probability. I mean, any profession where people have consistently made money, anywhere in the world where somebody has been able to become wildly successful, it's not because they were lucky. People don't get lucky. 99.9999999% of people that are very successful, they were probably more unlucky than everybody else in the world because they had to fail at a lot of things. A lot of day traders, as an example, they lose all of their money multiple times. They spend typically between 5 and 8 years barely scraping by before they start making a good living. And it's interesting, if you look at the way that the most successful people get there, they typically take between 5 and 10 years. Now, the cool thing is the time's going to pass regardless. So if you're trying to design a life, don't let this dissuade you. Like, oh my God, it's going to take 5 to 10 years. The time's going to pass anyway. The difference is, do you want to front load your suffering? So all of the hard times in your life would be for the next 5 to 10 years, and then the rest of your life you're pretty much just chilling. You're just smooth sailing through life. You've got, a system in place that regularly produces increasing amounts of money for you, increasing amounts of familial satisfaction, better friendships, everything else. You build these systems, you test things, you figure it out. Would you rather suffer a lot more for 5 to 10 years and then have the rest of your life just be unbelievable and amazing? You're going, a couple weeks ago, we were at the beach on a Monday. I mean, there's very few people in the world that can just leave in the middle of the day and go to the beach. Do you want your life to be like that? Or do you want your life to be this just like constant like hum of just low level negativity that it maybe it's not super painful, but it's basically just never really that good. And the best times of your life, you're basically just getting drunk or smoking weed or watching football games. That's the as good as it'll ever get for you because you are too scared to go through a little bit of pain. So instead of going through the pain for a few years, you just spend your whole life at a low level existence, always basically never feeling all that great about your life. I mean, to me, it seems pretty obvious, but the interesting thing is it's not taught. And so people don't know. They just don't know, and they don't even know that they don't know. And if you're lucky enough to learn this stuff, if you're lucky enough to find mentors, I mean, most of what I'm talking about, these are things that I learned through my mentors. They're things I've learned from working with people. I mean, some of the people I work with are literally making hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars a year. And it's the craziest thing to me because that seems more like what people should be doing to me than what most people do, where they're like just struggling every month. I mean, they're struggling to not even have anything. If you're going to struggle, at least get something for your struggling, at least get something for the pain. You know, there's a famous misquoting of the Buddha that like life is suffering. That's not quite what he said. It's close, but there's no English equivalent to what he actually said. He basically said life is dukkha, which is like cyclical, like pain and impermanence, and the fact that life basically has this low level like hum to it where you're basically like, if you don't do something about it, you're basically destined to live in this kind of low level unhappiness. And the interesting thing about this idea is that it's a choice. Everything in our lives after we're adults is a choice. You know, when you're a kid, you don't really have as many choices, right? You know, and people for the most part are going to forgive you. You might do something bad and you know that you shouldn't be doing it when you're a kid. For the most part, unless you like murder a bunch of people, like people are going to forgive you. They're just going to say, "Oh, you're just a stupid kid." But you could start any of this stuff at any age. Like I said, my 10-year-old, I'm teaching him what's an asset, what's a liability, what is a stock, what is a bond, what is a bill, what is a note, what's a will, what's a trust, what is an LLC, what is an S corp. All of these things are things kids can learn. If your kids are learning this stuff at 10 years old, when most people don't learn any of this stuff ever, or at best, they're learning it in their early 20s or early 30s. If your kids are learning this at 10 years old, how much better prepared are they going to be as adults? You know, if you don't like taxes because you don't understand them, imagine if you just taught your kids how they worked. And then when they file their first, income tax statement, hopefully it's before they're 18, by the way. Kids can make money too. They already know. They know what they can write off. They know how to write it off. They already know that they should have a trust set up that owns all of their businesses so that they have control, but they don't have any kind of, exposure. The trust is exposed, they're not. Like there's all kinds of different things that you could learn and you can teach your kids. You can set them up for the rest of their life. But you have to start by designing your own life first. You have to give up this idea of making a living, and you have to commit yourself 100% to designing a life. You have to commit to building a life that sometimes is going to be hard. If you can tell behind me, it's dark. I get up at 3:45 in the morning. It's dark in here because nobody else is awake. It's dark in here because the sun hasn't come out yet. And I get up that early in the morning by design, because I realized if I get up at 3:45, I have about 2 hours I can get in working before I go to the gym, and I can focus better because nobody else is awake. There's no noise. Nobody's doing yard work, or there's no construction or anything else going on. It's nothing to distract me. It's just me and my work. All of it's by design. And when you find a way and you learn how to do it, and you learn how to do it in a way that leads to, better and better opportunities for yourself, one day you will wake up and you will say, I can't believe this is even real life. And I know it happened for me. It happened for me. There's stuff in my life. I wake up and I'm like, I cannot even believe it. This morning I woke up and the first thing I thought was like, I can't believe I jumped out of a friggin' airplane yesterday. And I wasn't even really that scared. I was like, wow, this was like really peaceful. I felt like I was going to church. I felt like I was going to church. And, you know, the cool thing is, if you're just starting out, the scariest part is when you're just starting. It's just like when I went skydiving. I'll share the video on my YouTube. There's a split second where I was like, oh shit, we just jumped out of the plane. And then it was over. It was like completely gone. Like all fear. I was like, that's it. Like if we die, we die, you know? And that first moment in everything, in starting a business and starting a new workout routine and starting, you know, a new way of interacting with your spouse and children and starting a new, you know, practice of like meditation or prayer or something to increase your fulfillment in life. When you're first starting is when it's the scariest. The rest of it's just building the habit and then just finding ways to tweak it, to improve it. You know, the way that I meditate now compared to when I first started 6 years ago is pretty different. And when I first started, I didn't even start for the same reason that I now currently meditated. I started because I needed time alone. I was too busy. I was running 2 different companies. I was driving Lyft. I was like 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for months. But when you first start, if all you do is just face that fear and you say, look, I want to live an exceptional life. I want a life that I can feel good about on a daily basis, that I've built it. I know that I'm doing things because this is my design. I'm coming up with this. This is my plan. I'm the one who's going to decide how well my life ends up. That process, that idea, that simple process of just getting started alone will set you up that you're in the top 5% of people in the world. And all you have to do from there is keep learning, keep tweaking things, keep at it. And just remember, you know, when it comes down to your life, it's your responsibility. Nobody's going to come and save you. Nobody's showing up. Nobody's coming to make your life better for you. Nobody's going to buy the winning lottery ticket and just hand it to you instead, because they love you so much. There's no wealthy person out there waiting to just give you all of their money. There's nobody out there that's super fit that's just going to show up and put you in better shape. You're going to have to do the work. But the time is going to pass anyway. And if the time is going to pass, you're going to suffer anyway. At the very least, get what you want out of the situation, instead of settling for whatever's left over.